Like 5:15 maybe.
Okay.
And then we go till 6:30.
I don't have a
I
watch.
can tell you when.
Tell me about it.
Okay.
I can say the stuff like that. Check your story.
Should I introduce you?
It's up to you.
Yeah, let me introduce you.
What?
Let me introduce
If you want.
you. Hi, everybody. So this is Dhanadhar Swami. He's my guru who I met in India about 10 years ago. And a friend of mine is his student and said to me, you should definitely come to Vrindavan, I'll introduce you to my guru. And I was like, okay, cool, like a guru. Like I've never met like a real guru before, you know, like it's so exciting. That word is so exciting. And so I arrived in Vrindavan at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I went into this room, and then maybe like 6 o'clock in the morning, Kastuba shows up, which you all know Kastuba, and he's like, go this way. And I was like, okay. And I'm just following Kastuba, and we're walking down, I'm like in Vrindavan, which is this like amazing place where Radha and Krishna like spent their youth. And we walked by this one where he's like, that's my guru's, that's where my guru used to live. I'm like, oh my God, everybody's got gurus around here, you know. And then we went off this like really crazy road, and then we took a turn, and then it got really quiet as we were going down this very small street, and then we took like a left into this kind of gated area, and we took our shoes off, and we walked into this room, and it was kind of dark in the room, and I see my friend Akinshana there, and I see Dhanadhar Swami, and I see him from the back because he was sitting at his altar and just kind of like praying over his altar, but I didn't really know what was there. I just saw him there, and I was like so nervous, you know, just like really nervous. And then after maybe 15 minutes, he just kind of like turned around, and I was with a friend of mine too, so it was my friend and myself and Kastuba and a couple other people, and he just was so welcoming. I was so intimidated, and he was so kind and welcoming, and then spent the next week showing me around Vrindavan and all these special places, and it was so great, our conversations, because at that point I'd been like practicing yoga for maybe a decade and really interested in the spiritual side and the Yoga Sutras and all these other things that weren't part of the physical practice. But I wasn't like super satisfied with how I was understanding things or how everything went together. And in many of our conversations, Maharaj was just so good at explaining things to me in a way that, like, it's like I felt like I was making connections between things that I'd never made before, and it was so like practical, and he made things very easy to understand. And I remember my friend Akinshana, who said, you have to be my guru. I said, why is this person your guru? Like, why did you like choose Dhanadhar Swami as your guru? And he said, I was at a seminar, and he gave like a lecture, and I had a few questions. He said, and I loved the way he answered my questions. And I remember him saying that to me, and then I had like a similar experience of getting a lot of my questions like answered, but also like pointing me towards more critical thinking about things, and inspiring me to go a little bit deeper into, you know, the different practices. So anyways, now we've been, you know, like so close for all these years, and Maharaj came back to, he lives in the city for half the year, and basically the city and now other places too, and then India for half the year. And my favorite thing that really I do is go to Vrindavan and spend time with Maharaj, and having him take me places and show me things that you probably wouldn't see otherwise. So I'm really excited for him to be here, and a couple of the people from the other group are here too, because they didn't have a chance to have Dhanadhar Swami in their training just because of the timing. Maharaj was in India and then Colombia, but we're here today, and I'm so glad that you're all here and that you get an opportunity to hear from Dhanadhar Swami. So thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, nice to meet all of you. Bryn was talking about questions. We only have 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours now. And there could be a lot to discuss. But I have a saying, it's not, as a teacher, it's not just important to speak truth. It's important that truth is understood. And therefore, a good teacher, and some of you may be teachers, or are teachers, or be parents, or we all have an opportunity to share what we have. You have to speak through the frame of reference of the person you're speaking to. Even if it's the same language, it's not. People understand words in different ways. And even words that may be used in one tradition have a different understanding in another tradition. Words are impregnated with their usage over years. Like a good spiritual term, for example, that's really wonderful, and in spiritual terms, and in India you may say it all the time, is gotta surrender. You know, but the history of use, perhaps in a Western context, or in probably situations where things are dysfunctional, or maybe surrender means surrender could mean a child in a mother's arms that's completely given over to the mother's protection and care, or it can mean someone in World War II in a long march with a bayonet in their back. So therefore, spiritual topics are often doing what's called dialectic. If you look at the main spiritual text, there's conversations, because a teacher may speak, but once the teacher speaks, then he elicits a response, a question from the student. And according to the answer the student gives, the teacher understands what is lacking in that student's frame of reference to understand what I'm speaking about. And it may go on and on and on and on and on before you can speak the truth. And a teacher should be one, in whatever subject they are, that represents that. Otherwise, what's the use of being a teacher? So that the teacher can actually speak his subject, speak that truth, and have the truth understood. So I have to say, in this class, I'm not just interested in giving you your 2.5 hours towards your 200-hour goal. I'm not saying that sarcastically. Maybe I did. I'm not just, that's not, I want you to learn something. And I've been a practitioner of the path of yoga, bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion, for 50 years, maybe almost 50 years, since 1950, so almost 49 years. So I'm going to speak at the beginning, and then I'd like to open it up for questions at any time, so that I can actually understand what your frame of reference is. What are you understanding by what I'm speaking? Mm-hmm. So that's really important, and hopefully in that way we can get perhaps the essence of this subject, which I think is very practical. Now, I usually begin with some kind of question, because I know, because I'm experienced in teaching, it's really important to connect to the audience. And one way to connect to the audience is make the audience active rather than passive. Passive is I just speak, so I'm going to make you active now by asking the question. And Bryn, it's a new question, because Bryn knows the question I would ask. And it's a very good question that I used to ask. I used to give a happiness test. I used to ask 3 questions. This is completely different. It's new. So I'm going to Now you have to fill in the blank. Okay, I'm going to ask you something quickly. I'm not going to ask you to test you on the answer, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say a question. I'm going to leave a blank, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. Because if I ask you to think about it, you'll think of the answer that makes you look good, rather than the answer you really give. Okay, so I'm going to ask it. Okay, and you got it. The first thing comes to your mind, and be honest. Most important thing in spiritual life is honesty. Not sincerity. You can't. There's no use to a spiritual path, because you'll have a philosophy and you'll act completely in a different way. This word integrity comes from the word integral. Integral means to become one with something. So when you have integrity, your life and your answers are one with what you believe. And when you don't have integrity, the opposite is called hypocrisy. And the world is just filled with that type of inconsistency today. And we see how we suffer from it, okay? This is another type of happiness test, but a different one than I usually give. Ready? When I go like that, that's what you got to fill in. I will be happy when?
I cannot answer that well.
You're thinking. You're just supposed to say the first thing that comes to your mind. Now, whatever you said, you gave one of two answers. They fit within one or two categories. The first category is, I will be happy when, in the future, the world conform to my desires. I will be happy in the future. This is where I am now. These are my desires. But the world is not moving according to it now. I want this, but this is there, and I want this, and this is there, and I want this. But I will be happy in the future when it's exactly the same. The partner I wanted, the money I wanted, the career I wanted, the place I wanted. Right? So one answer was like that, right? And maybe you're really honest. Maybe somebody was really spiritual and honest. At least the first part of spiritual is honesty. They said, I will be happy when I win the lottery. Mega Millions. I hold that big check in front of the 7-Eleven with my workmates. The other answer is, I will be happy not when I control the world to conform to my desires. I will be happy when I conform my consciousness to fit to my destiny in the world. These are the two choices. All right? I'll be happy when I control the world. I'll be happy when I control myself. These are the two choices. Now, I'm going to analyze the first choice. I will be happy in the future when I'm able to control the world, or the world somehow, well, I control the world to conform to my desires. Now, there's three problems from that from a spiritual perspective. The first problem is to be happy in that way, you have to be able to control the world. Or at least to have a chance to be happy in that way. But we're not the controllers. Which if that's your objective, and you think, I'll see that there's problems even if that happens, but even if that happens, what's the problem? You're still not the controller. And here's something that's really heavy. A pinch of pain is felt more than a ton of happiness. on the material platform. So even if you're that, right? Well, you got the richest man in the world, right? He wasn't satisfied. He had to find another girlfriend, right? He had all the money in the world, but he's not satisfied. Or he finds the other girlfriend and then he gets a toothache. Or he doesn't get a toothache, but he's going to die. But anyway, so you're not the controller, but let's say that you actually achieve that. In the future, you got the partner, that perfect partner that you were just dreaming about your life, that you knew only could fall from the sky because there's no one that can meet those qualifications of being a ladies here, so being a man, being a man, but really being a man. Like, being a man so you can respect them, but being a man so that they respect you. And has enough money and so many other things. Maybe. So let's say that happens. Another problem. It's temporary. So it's filled with duality. Duality means whatever is there, the opposite is also there. So what's the duality? One, I fear I'll lose it, and it will be painful when I do. I remember one of my friends, a monk, maybe on the heavy side monk, he used to have a briefcase. He used to have a sticker, life is tough and then you die. Now, let's say you get it. You get that thing that you're looking for, and you can actually keep it always. What is the problem? The problem is still not happiness, because happiness is not things. Happiness is consciousness. So you still haven't got happiness. There's a saying, I don't know where I got the saying, but it gave two words. Pleasure would mean sensual stimulation and ego gratification. And happiness would be the condition of the heart. So there's a saying, it said, pleasure is the happiness of a madman. And happiness is the pleasure of the sage. So happiness is consciousness. It's not what you have, it's how you feel. Eleonora. This is Eleonora. She's from Colombia. She studies in America, but I have an ashram in her city. And it's a beautiful city with a bad reputation. But it's like a paradise. Can you imagine a place where the temperature is the same all year round? And it's 70 degrees low and 90 degrees high, and it never varies one day in the year. So I have an ashram there, a place, and I go down there twice a year. And right behind my ashram is a little kind of horse farm. You make a right, and there's these simple people that take care of cows. Simple people that take care of cows. Just see this man's face. How simple he lives. And how happy he is. I haven't rode on the train in a long time, but recently I was staying in, when I come to New York, I stay in Brooklyn, get on the Q train, and I looked around, and a song came to my mind. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? So it's consciousness. And when you talk yoga, and there's different forms of yoga, but yoga basically means meditation to control the mind. to elevate one's vision, to see reality, reality which is beautiful. That's what yoga means, and there's different ways to do it. So they all deal with some type of meditation. So I'm going to talk about the process of bhakti yoga through the process of meditation. And I'm going to explain how yoga works, and then how within yoga, bhakti yoga works. So I'm going to do it with this ancient PowerPoint presentation. So this is what yoga means. I think the first principle in yoga would be that the mind is like a lens. You see through it. And that when the lens is in what's called sattva, it's called the mode of goodness, but literally it means, sattva means the true nature of something, the nature of being. So the true nature of a lens is that it's clean and not distorted. And when the mind is clean and not distorted, there are no more problems. Because all problems are perceptual, they're not actual. They're not what's there, but how you see them. Now, I could stop right there and we could discuss the whole rest of the class on that point, because what do you mean this, what do you mean that? But I'll just give a simple example. For example, the greatest problem, suffering, is when you lose your attachments. Basically, when something goes away against your desires, that's suffering. So the greatest suffering is death, because everything goes against your desires. And even your core desires of your identity is destroyed. There's a German sociologist or philosopher named Ernest Becker. He wrote a book, Denial of Death, where he actually discussed how all problems are kind of to try to counteract our immortality, all impulses, all desire. And you lose everything. But what yoga tells you is if you bring the mind to sattva and you see clearly, then you'll understand that you're eternal. And you'll realize it and see it and understand that death is the illusion of non-existence. Death does not exist. Our greatest problem does not exist. So I'll say this Sanskrit and